Maiso, like this. I thought about what to give a shir on, and Baruch Hashem sent me an idea that we should give a shir. We should learn, really. We're coming to learn together. That we should learn Sipurim Isis, the famous stories, 13 stories Rav Nachman said, plus many more, but the Sipurim Isis is 13. And we should start from the first story. Now, what am I coming to do over here? Now, everybody, if you want to learn the stories, anybody could go online, type in stories of Rabbi Nachman, like that, and you'll get the whole in English translation. So that's not what I'm coming for, because then I'd be wasting all your time. Instead, you could sit and read it yourself. I'd like to go into depth in each word, as we know that the Sipurim Maisis of Rav Nachman are tremendous Kabbalistic aspects. Each word represents Ein Sof, no end to deepness of all the worlds and levels, everything about the Bria and the creation of the world. So we can try to go much deeper, or a little deeper, than just what it seems on the page of a nice story, which is also good to read on your own time. Like this. The question is, first of all, why did Rav Nachman write these stories? What do you write these stories for? They're fascinating stories, but there are a lot of good novelists, Lahavdil, that wrote beautiful, long, beautiful stories. So what's really the occasion over here? Rav Nachman wrote a sefer called the Kutmaran, where you see it's endless, and then all of a sudden he writes nice, beautiful stories. It's just not the style of Rav Nachman, really. The answer is, in the Kutmaran, Rav Nachman basically asks this question in other words, and he answers the question in Torah Samach and Chelik Aleph. How does he answer the kasha? He says like this: when a person, when a person is in a spiritual slumber, how does a tzaddik wake up this person? What he does is he has to hide the Torah in stories. So Rav Nachman explains a little later what's the reason. So Rav Nachman says because sometimes the tzaddik is on such a high level, that his Torah is on such a high level, that if all of a sudden he starts throwing all his Torah and all the crazy ideas that this person has no idea, he's in such a low place, you turn to the person, you start telling him all these amazing things, what happens? Riboy Or. What's a Riboy Or? Riboy Or happens very often in the Baal Tshuva world, unfortunately, when somebody gets all into spirituality and he becomes, as they call it, it flips out, becomes a little cuckoo. It's true, he becomes a little cuckoo, and some of them end up in the kotel with their heads on the hands, on the wall for 18 hours a day, and trust me, they're not from the Lamav of Tzaddikim. There are some, but some of them are not. The point is, so the tzaddik has to bring down these huge ideas, but he has to dress them. How does he dress them? Within a story. So the person hears a story, and he gets a little bit of the story, and then all of a sudden, when something happens that's kind of like the story, he starts thinking more of the story, and that's how he builds into it. So it's not just boom, it's kind of like he builds it up. That's what the Rebbe says over here. The Rebbe says another reason is because we know that the Yetzer Hara doesn't want this person to be Chazir B'Tshuva, to wake up. So the Yetzer Hara does is, what does he do? He grabs these Torahs, he tries to steal them so it shouldn't be mashpi on the person. It shouldn't work. So the Rebbe says, it's like on Rosh Hashanah. Why do we blow a shofar? To mix up the Satan. The same idea here. The Rebbe brings down these huge ideas, puts it in a story, so the Yetzer Hara says, oh, the person's just reading stories. What's the big deal? Let him read stories. So Dr. Rebbe, that's how you beat the Yetzer Hara. So the two reasons why we say stories are that it shouldn't destroy the person in 1 second because it's so much light, spiritual light. And the second reason is that it should get to the person without the Yetzer Hara coming to steal it. The mazikim and all the klippos. Now, to be makdam over here, I want to, before we get into all the stories, today really we're not going to get so much into the story, it's more of a hagdama, but an introduction to the stories, to understand what the stories are about. I'd like to read a few pieces of how Rav Nachman, the biggest student, as we know, Balakutei Halachos, how he introduces the Sipurim Maisis of Rav Nachman. He writes over here, Sipurim Maisis Niflois V'Nerois. The stories of Rav Nachman, he's talking about, are wonderful and amazing. Asher Zechinu L'Shmaya Peh Al Peh Mipiv HaKadosh. He's writing it that it's not usually a story. Why is he writing this? That we heard from his mouth? Because usually when a person says a story over from somebody, you got to check it 15 times, because usually after already one generation down of the story, people are adding in their own things because they get excited about the story, and this one throws in his idea because it must be that way. Zorkat Nasan, everything that we write is exact word for word what Rav Nachman said. Piv al piv. This is not that I heard it from somebody else or heard it from somebody else. We sat there in front of Rav Nachman and wrote word for word what he wrote. What he told us to write. Basically what he wrote, because he dictated. Now, which he balanced and he was misakin. Rav Nachman fixed and created a lot of these mishalim. And he dressed the history and he hid hasogis gvois vatum spur ma'is v'drachim leflaim roim moed. Ki zois leflaim yisrael al gulav tomorrow. Rav Nachman writes that in these stories, Rav Nachman has written the highest aspects of Yiddishkeit, including when the Geula is going to be, and about the Geula, about the redemption when Mashiach, and about how Hashem created the world, things that we can't understand even after all the Arizals we learn in Shar Kavanas and Shar Kedusha and Shar everything. We have no idea what Rav Nachman's talking about. Now, another piece Rav Nachman brings over here is, Rav Nachman was one time said that people have sometimes they, when somebody, many times when you have a tzaddik who is such a high level, a lot of tzaddikim, they feel jealous of that tzaddik. It's an emistic thing. It's kanois because they feel the tzaddik has everything. Rav Nachman had everything. So he said, if I give all these ideas out and all these huge ideas, people start saying, oh, Rav Nachman. But if he says, if I dress it in stories, what are they going to say? They're going to say, all right, what could they say bad about stories? So that's also another reason why he put it in stories, but it was a nice vort. Now, Rav Nachman writes, this is his lashon, incredible. Rav Nachman told, Rav Nachman said, I heard Rav Nachman say, these stories, if you change one word from this story, that means you have no idea what the story is talking about. That's the gravity of each word. What I mean gravity? The depth and the seriousness of taking each word and analyzing it and trying to understand it. Now, Rav Nachman also writes that even somebody who knows all Kisvei Arizal, all Zohar Kodesh and everything, and he reads my stories, he still maybe understands a drop of what my stories are. It's amazing because you start reading the stories and you hear a shir about Arizals and you start looking and you start thinking that you know the story. Because you're talking kabbalah, so everybody thinks that when they know a few pages in Arizal, they become the biggest mekubalim. They don't realize that that's not kabbalah. That's not even the introduction to kabbalah. Real kabbalah is not written down. You have to learn these shiurim just so that what? It says, the Parashat Sulam writes this. The Parashat Sulam, who wrote one of the most famous Perushim on the Zohar, he said that he didn't learn Kabbalah until they sent him a special person to teach him Kabbalah. Everything that he was learning and everything is that they understand that you're ready for them to, they send the person now, that messenger, to teach you the real secrets. And that is not written, and if it's written in code. Now, what's interesting is, Rav Nachman one time said a beautiful thing. He said something very funny. He said, usually the world, when they hear stories, it's to put them to sleep. Bedtime stories. He says, my stories are the opposite, to wake people up. He said, my stories are a special type of stories. It's not that puts people to sleep. Your mommy tells you a story in bedtime. Rav Nachman's stories are stories to wake the soul up, wake the neshama up of a yid who's searching and searching. And what's amazing is, when people are going through the hardest things, I find, personally, everybody goes through hard. When I go through difficult things, I open shiurim, it gives me the most. Because it's life. It's life. Every word is like, you live it, every word that's in there. Even on the simple levels, not on the deep Kabbalistic levels and realms. Now, what's interesting is like this. Rav Nachman also said another reason why he started saying stories. We said a bunch of reasons. Another reason why it's interesting, he kind of said it in an embarrassing way to us, that he said, Lord, what can I do? I taught you Torah, and you haven't changed, you haven't listened. So now I got to start telling you stories. Maybe stories will help you to start serving Hashem and start doing what you have to do. But you know what? What I say is Baruch Hashem, because we were zeicha to have Tzipori Maisis, because of this lacking. The point is, let me just hold 1 second. So that's the Agadama that I'd like to give so far. Now I'd like to start the actual story. Story starts in the first story in the Tzipori Maisis. The first sentence is not really part of the story. It's an introduction in itself to the story. Rav Nachman starts off the story like this. Ona v'omar, he answered and said, this is Rav Nachman, Baderech, on the way, siparti ma'isa, I said a story, shekol mi shehaya shoima, whoever heard this story, haya le'hir tshuva, had a hir tshuva. That means they had a thought of doing tshuva. V'zohi, and this is the story. Now today we're not going to get into the actual story, but I'd like to explain. Who cares? But derech, he said a story. So you want to say he said a story and people had tshuva, but why by derech? Every word we said is just fountains of wisdom. The answer is like this. Lamaisa, what's the Rebbe teaching us in Sipurei Maisis, as we'll see in the stories? The story of Sipurei Maisis is really teaching us what life is about. Each person to his level. The more you understand Sipurei Maisis, the more you understand the world. The world as we see it is fake. There's a famous movie that's called The Matrix. What's a matrix? That everybody, it's in a computer. What's interesting is the people who produced the movie were two Jews, and everything that they took it from, they said they took it from Kabbalah. What's the idea? The idea is we are in a matrix. Obviously, we're not attached to computers, but we're inside a world that's really a matrix, just a big matrix. And it's like the sun is moving and everything is moving, but it's not. Who's really doing everything? It's really Rabbanu Shalom outside the program. We're inside a program, and outside the program is Rabbanu Shalom. What's interesting is that everything we see is not really the reality. It's fake. What's the matrix? It's not the reality. We're not in the real reality. The real reality is the spirituality of this world. The physicality is not. But through the physicality, we can get to the spirituality. That, yes, but that's a whole different situation. Rav Nachman is teaching us about life. He teaches us these huge aspects about spirituality that we start understanding how things work in this world. What's fascinating is that you see, there's a lot of people, I know a lot of intelligent people that became Baal Tshuvas, they became religious, and what really brought them to Yiddishkeit, to religion, the Rabbanism, was through Kabbalah. And I asked them why. Because what's interesting is that me too, I feel that Kabbalah, some people say, I'm not interested, I want to just, pshitus, simplicity. I think the answer is, from what I understand from them, I think the answer is because many people have this, their neshama has this thirst to understand how everything works. But they're looking at a physical world, and they understand the physical world does not show you how this world works. But they understand that it represents how things work. So all of a sudden, Kabbalah comes in, and what does Kabbalah do? Kabbalah starts teaching you how this physical world works, because really this world is just a copy of all the spiritual worlds. Now, so why does Rav Nachman say baderech? Because life is really a derech. What's derech mean? The way. Our life, what's our life? Who are we? Our neshama, our soul. Our soul comes from a huge high place in the next world, the holy realms, right? The world of neshamas. Like Rav Nachman says, it's a garden and there's neshamas there, and Kadosh Baruch Hu takes and brings it down. And the neshama doesn't want to come down because he knows what he's going to deal with. She knows what she's going to deal with. But she comes down because that's what the Rabbanu Shalom made this world for, to go through tests. But what's interesting is when the neshama comes down, she has to go in spiritual and physical travels. You see that a person's born in Baltimore, a person's born in Cleveland, I was born in New York, he was born in Israel, he was born here. What's the reason? Because each soul has its travel it has to do physically, because the physical travel that he's doing, there's a spiritual thing that he has to do over there. Next year, B'ezrat Hashem, I'm going to go into the deep aspects, B'ezrat Hashem, based on Kabbalah and all that. What does it mean going through the derech? Today I'm going to try to keep it more simple, as to just understand that life is about a travel. There's a story with the Chofetz Chaim, that was a rich person that came to the Chofetz Chaim, unbelievable story, and he came to visit the Chofetz Chaim. He came to Radin, and he heard that the Chofetz Chaim is the Gadol Ador. He wanted to go visit him, Poshet. Who doesn't want to see the tzaddik? Comes to the Chofetz Chaim's house. He sees the Chofetz Chaim is sitting there, a broken chair, no furniture in the house. There's nothing there. He turned to the rich person turned to Chofetz Chaim. He said, "How do you live like this? You're a gadol. People will give you money for everything." Chofetz Chaim answered, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "You're a rich person. You're very well-to-do. Why do you come with 2 bags on your shoulders? Why don't you come with all your riches?" He said, "I don't understand. It's very logical. I'm here. I'm traveling. I'm just passing through the town. What am I going to bring? My furniture, my toaster ovens, whatever they had back then." So the Chofetz Chaim said, "I'm also just traveling. This world for me is I'm just traveling right through. My real up there." The Chofetz Chaim looked at his life and he realized that it's just a travel. We're here. Life is one nice travel. Life is about one thing. Going from point A to B. Point A to B to C to D until it's over, and then we go back where we are. So it's really just one travel. How do we get through this travel? How do we figure out this travel? This derech? That's what the Rebbe is going to teach us. That each Jew has to find out his own neshama, his soul, what that soul needs in order to go through the travel and to be successful in its travel. And to make it. So why did the Rebbe do it in stories? So this is what I wanted to say. So life really is one big story. It's a story. Life is a story. It's called, what's life? Life's story. It's not just it's the notion of life story. It's a real thing. Life in itself is a story. That's why people write books about their lives, because they're writing a story based on their lives. Everything really is based on a story. Sometimes it's false, never happened, but it's based on a fake story, but it's based on stories, but it's based on a person's life. It's based on this one killed this one, or this one robbed this one, or this one married this one fell in love. It's all about somebody's personal life. Because life in itself, the taich, the meaning of life is a story. So when a person is going through life and a story, person falls asleep. He doesn't know what his story is about. In our terms, we say spiritual slumber. How does the person wake up? He needs another story to remind him that his own life is a story. So Rav Nachman, that's why I wanted to say, this is why I wanted to say that Rav Nachman, according to Rav Nachman, of course, he said because of the Yetzer Hara, he didn't want him to grab the Torah. But I think the real reason why he wrote it in a way of a story is not because the ideas were too high, of course, but it's because to remind us that our own lives is one big fat story. That we have to understand to lead how do we write our story? How do we write our story? By our actions. What do you mean we write our story by our actions? In Perkei Avos, the Mishnah says that every single action that a person does is written in the next world. And you know what? There's a raya. It says by Aaron HaKohen that what happened? Aaron HaKohen, he got punished because he didn't come out. When Moshe Rabbeinu came with dancing and things. And all that. So one of the Mepharshim explains that if Aaron HaKohen knew and realized that his whole life, every action he does is written up there, he would have realized beforehand to come out with drums and and dancing and all that. Moshe Rabbeinu came back after so many years. The answer is, we have to understand and look at ourselves that our life is one fat story. Why do I say fat story? Because usually a story, say with all twists and turns, one nice spider's web. That should be maybe the name of the novel, a spider's web. You back in and out, and life is just from day to day. Because that is part of the travels. The travel is you're writing your own story. You're writing your own story, but who's writing it? Amalek up in Shemayim. But it's you writing it because they're only writing what your actions are saying. Like when a person says a story and he has somebody he's dictating a story, same thing. But we have a big achrayus responsibility because if we don't watch what we do, then when we come up there, what's written is not a very good sign. And what happens is, in the Svarim it says that the actual Averas come and the letters, there's a Sefer Torah up there, and everywhere where you did an Avera, the letters come out of the Sefer Torah and they start talking. And they start saying that you did this to me, and you did this, and you created me, and sexual lust, and not keeping Shabbat, and all that. The good thing is we have tshuva, Baruch Hashem, which could turn everything into beauty, but that's a different point. Now, what's interesting is, I want to take it a little further now. What does the Rebbe mean? So we said derech is life story. That's what the Rebbe is saying. But derech, because that's really all the Spurimaisis. The Rebbe in Torah Vav, in Likutei Moharan over here in Torah Vav, the Rebbe says, you know what, I'll say it outside because it's actually a long piece and I'll explain. The Rebbe says, there's a holy word in one of the Shemus of Hashem, one of the high Shemus, it's called Baki. Baki is one of the holy names, and Baki times itself, meaning Baki, twice Baki equals exact same number as what? Derech. What's Derech? It's 224. 224, Baki times 2 is 224. What is Rav Nachman saying? Rav Nachman says, this is just a little bit of the Torah, but we'll explain. Rav Nachman says this constantly. In order for a person to go through life, on life's derech, which is life's story, he has to have two things. He has to be a Baki in two things. What is a Baki? Somebody with profession, meaning he has it under control. He's a Baki, he knows what he's doing. He uses his smarts, it's a technique. What's a technique? Two things. Rav Nachman says, Baki barotzi, Baki b'shoif. And he bases it on a pasuk in Tehillim, that David HaMelech says to Hashem, however high I get, you're there. However low, Vatzil Sha'il Hinecha, you're also here. It means God is everywhere. Why is God everywhere? Because if God wasn't everywhere, then at that place wouldn't exist. Because everything only exists because God is there. God gives life. So David HaMelech was saying essentially that it doesn't matter where I am, I always can find you. And Rav Nachman says, that's the Baki Baratzi, Baki B'Shoiv. When a person's Baki Baratzi, a person's on a high level, he says to himself, why am I a high level? Rav Nachman says, at that point you have to know you know nothing. Because the point to know is that you know nothing. But until you know something, you can't say that I know nothing. That's the whole chiddush of Baki Baratzi. Baki Baratzi is, you have to understand that God is infinite and you're finite. So wherever you go, you're still nowhere compared to what God is, because God is endless. So that is one Baki. A person in life, he gets all of a sudden a beautiful art, and he starts learning, kabbalah, and this one's finishing Shas, and this one's watching his Lashon Hara, and he feels, wow, I'm amazing. Listen, You're right, it's beautiful. I got to give you credit. Whoever watches Lashon Hara, it's beautiful. Finish Shas, it's amazing, especially if you know it, and especially if you want to connect to Hashem through it. But know that you're nowhere. At the same time, it's emes. Know that you're nowhere. Rav Nachman every day used to say to his students, I know nothing. What do you want from me? He used to scream at them. It says in Sichas Aran there. Rav Nachman writes, the Rebbe used to scream at us, he knows nothing. And then the Rebbe used to give a huge holy Torah that was like, forget about it. You have no idea what he's talking about. But what was the point? Because the Rebbe is saying, I'm nothing, I know nothing. And the Rebbe said that was the only way that he was able to go on. And each day to teach something new. Because if he felt that he knew, so he said, I know nothing, I got to start over. And he started over. Somebody just told me, Rabbi Eliashiv, who was the famous Zatzal, who was one of the famous Paisik class. Every time at 100 years old, every time he started a sugya, the whole idea of, let's say, of this halacha or this gemara, he used to start from the Torah and he read the gemara, he read the pasuk and Rashi, like he was starting like a 2-year-old. He went through, then he read the Mishnah on he knew backwards and forwards. He knew it every word in and out, because the answer is, I know nothing, I start over in Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem is learning Torah, is midas everything. That's Baki Barotzi. That's one derech. That's one Baki, which is in the derech. The other part of derech is Baki B'Shoiv. Now let's say a person's in the klippus. But guy, he's on drugs, he's in this thing, whatever. We've all been there, all done that, so we all know, each person knows what his lowest point was rock bottom. But it's rock bottom. But just know there's always even more than rock bottom, because there's always more, because there's no end to rock bottom, because you always go further and further away from Hashem, because Hashem is endless also. But you have to understand that that even if you're there, Atzil she'ol hineko. David HaMelech says, Hashem, I'm in the depths, I'm in the abbeys, right? I'm terrible place, but you're still here. Because Rabbeinu Shalom is everywhere. You could go through the biggest problems in life, you could do the biggest, I know people, personally, I know people that were the biggest gangsters. They killed people. They had no idea better. They grew up in families like that, became balchuvas. I'm telling you, they keep people alive with their smiles. How's that possible? Because when they fell, they knew Hashem was there also, and they were able to get out of it only through Hashem. And that's what Rav Nachman writes in the Chelik Beis. He writes the Torah of Yud Beis. What's Ayeh? What's the word of Ayeh? Ayeh is a tremendous kabbalah aspect in Maimer Sotum and all that. It's based on a lot of Zohar and all that. We're not going to get into that. The point is, it's based on the whole Tikkunei Zohar. But what the point of the idea is there, that you could scream to Hashem always. Always scream to Hashem. This is what the Rebbe is saying over here. Baderech. The first part that we said already is that the story, life's a story. How do you get through life's story? Baderech. What's Baderech? Baderech is when Baki Brati Baki B'Shev. No matter what place you are, you always connect to Hashem. You always go back to Rabbeinu Shalom, because He's there as much as He is over there, as much as over there, because God is infinite. And there's no shapes and sizes to God. There's no measurements. He's everywhere. What's interesting is, what are we really afraid of? What are we afraid of? What are these fallings that we have? The fallings that we have are usually bilbulim and sveikus and notions of is there God, isn't there God? This started a long, long time ago. What does it say? Ashekorcha baderech by Amalek. Rabbeinu Shalom says, wipe away Amalek, because they were the ones that cooled you, they cooled it off baderech. Why say baderech? Who cares where they did it? I was thinking one day, who cares where they did it? What's Amalek? Amalek equals 248. I'm sorry, not 240, I apologize. 240. What other word is 240? 2 words. Suffolk and mar, bitter. Amalek is not the physical battles. Of course, that happened. That's not representing. Amalek is, what did the Yidden say when they left Mitzrayim? They turned to Hashem and they said, Hayesh Hashem b'kibenu, was Hashem with us? Let me ask you a question. Are you joking? You just saw Kriyas Yamsuf. You just saw Makos. You just saw the craziest miracles, and you saw God. What it says in the Torah, it's right that what Yecheskel Navi saw, the Shifcha, the servant, the maidservant saw even more. I don't know if you ever read Yecheskel Navi, but he saw the Merkava. You know what that means? That means the chariot of God, which is obviously not animals. It's angels, and like the Rambam says, he saw the highest of angels, the Chayot, which is the highest. The Rambam says in the first paragraph, Rambam, you say that Torah. Incredible. Well, what's going on over here? Because that's Amalek. You have Hashem with you, but Amalek comes and starts giving you bilbulim and kfira. How do you deal with Amalek? Amalek puts sveikas, Suffolk, 240, mar, that causes a lot of bitterness. People go crazy. They can't deal with it. Is there Hashem? They lose hope and everything. How do you deal with it? Baderech. That he did it was baderech. the way, just like they came and hit you through Baderech, that's how you beat them, through Baderech. What's Derech? Boki broti, boki b'shoif. Rabbeinu Shalom, I don't care, no matter how much I think about you and I don't know if you exist or I hit you sometimes. We all sometimes say to God, what are you doing this to me for? Oh, what, you can't create everything good? We can't. We don't understand. That's where Amun is a beyond seichel. Why do you take this one away from me? Why do you take this one away from me? Why did this kid just get killed? What's going on in Eretz Yisrael? This one gets stabbed. I mean, why? Why? How many Baal Tshuvas are there? How many people are trying to be mechazik each other? We're giving shiurim people. Am Yisrael is learning. Look how many yeshivas there are. And you hear about a stabbing, and then you hear about this, and you hear about tzaddikim dying from crazy stuff. Well, I just heard a Rebbe, his name is Daish actually, the Daish Rebbe, but not Daish, it's Daish, Dalet Ayin Shin. His son was a tremendous tzaddik. His son was known that he was able to take out Ayin Horos from people. It has to do with Mashiach, I think, because what's interesting is Ayin is connected 70, it's connected to 70 nations, but that's maybe a different shir. But what's interesting is, one day he was sitting, that's it, his neshama left, like you see, Hashem, why? He was doing so much for you. He was doing everything. He was helping all Am Yisrael. The answer is, we don't know anything. The answer is, sometimes it's tough though. Sometimes, your wife screams at you, your kids, either that, or God forbid, somebody's not married after many years, and he's telling you, I say to Hashem, am I that bad? I put on tefillin. I talk to you. I'm begging you. It doesn't go. How do you stay strong through emunah? That's how you stay strong. What's emunah? So now when we go, that's baderech. Baderech is that you stay strong. That even if from the depths, Hashem, I'm still going to call out to you. How do I call out? Aye, through screaming, which is tefillah. Aye, Abba, right? What's interesting is, when it says, so now I want to tell you like this, something amazing. A couple of questions that I had on a parasha, and the answer fits in beautifully, and with that, Bezat Hashem, we will finish off today's shir, Bezat Hashem. Now, what's interesting is, it says in Parashat Beshalach, the story of Amalek, it says, Vayove Amalek came v'yilochim ayim Yisrael b'Refidim, and they started fighting with the Jewish nation Refidim. V'yema Moshe Yeshua said, and he told Yeshua to go out to fight. And what happened? It says, when he went out, Moshe Rabbeinu sat on top of the mountain, and he put his hands up, and Hur and Aaron held his hands up. And then it says when he raised his hand, the Jews, they won the Amalek, and when they put their hands down, Amalek won. Right? And what's Vayi Yadav Emunah? Targum Uncle says, what is that? They were stretched out in tefillah. That means that how do you win the battle against Amalek? Through tefillah. What does Baki Bratzi Baki B'Shayv said? He's talking to Hashem, tefillah. I had a few questions here. And it says, and then it says, Yeshua made weak Amalek through the sword. So I had 5 questions over here that I was thinking about. One of them is, first of all, why did Moshe Rabbeinu go out to fight? Why send Yeshua? Moshe Rabbeinu was much greater. Why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu go out? The second question that I had is, meaning also, so why did Moshe Rabbeinu himself go out? The second question is, why did Hashem let Amalek stick around? Why didn't he destroy them? They were doing terrible things to the Yidden. They didn't want Amalek. What are you letting them stay around for? That's the second question I had. The third question I had is, I don't understand something. If the hands were the one winning the war, why'd they let the hands down? Hold the hands up until they win the war. What do you mean? It says when the hands were up, they were winning. When the hands were down, they were losing. I don't know, if I was normal and I had a battle plan, I'd say keep the hands up, brother. You know what I mean? Everybody looks up and it's all good. The fourth question I had was, what do we care if it was according to his sword and according to, what's the pasuk telling us? Who cares how they won the battle, through the sword or through the bow and arrow? What's the difference? Just say they won the war because they through their emunah. What's interesting is that what was my 5th question? I apologize. Maybe we'll come back to me.
There it is.
What was my 5th question? Beautiful. We'll come up with an answer, somehow to answer the question. Maybe the question will come up. But I wanted to say like this. The answer is, there's a famous Rashash of Shalom Sharabi, one of the biggest Mekubalim, that the Arizal said on him, told Reb Chaim Vital that don't worry, when somebody great is going to finish my works in a couple of hundred, whatever, it was a couple of hundred later, and he's going to be, and we know that was the Rashash. That's what the Mekubalim say. The Rashash says, and the Leshem talks about it, was the grandfather of Eliashiv, who the Leshem wrote a tremendous sefer on Kabbalah. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is, he says like this, he says something that's incredible, and I first time I heard it, I was like, whoa. He says that every test that every human being goes through, Hashem already created all these tests before Bria Sa'ilam. Before he created human being even, he created the test beforehand. So I asked the question, I don't understand something. So where do we have the Bechira? Usually the Bechira is we have a choice to it. And then you're giving us tests, so where's our free will? The answer is that the Rashash is saying Azah Chiddush. Our whole lives is not about, we don't control our story about where we go and all that. That's Hashem. Where do we control our derech? How do we accept what Hashem sends us? Do we accept it through Baki Brati, Baki B'Shoy? Do we turn with Tefillah? Because we know that when Hashem sends something, He can send it through the Klippas, Chas v'Shalom, or Be'ezrat Hashem through the Kedusha. Our thing is, how do we accept it? When we accept it with happiness, it becomes Kedusha. If we accept it and complain about it, like Rav says, the biggest part of Gullus is because we complain about what Hashem sends us instead of saying thank you. Baki Brati, Baki B'Shoy is not saying to Hashem, not thank you. It's saying, Hashem, I know this is for the good, but I can't do anything without you. I need you at the end of the day. It could be for the good, but right now it's hard for me. And when it's hard, I need your help. I'm your child. So what do we understand? The Mesilas, so let's go a little weiter. The Mesilas Yesharim writes that this idea, he doesn't spring from the Rashash, but this idea that the Rashash says, based on the Leshem, talks about that everything was, all the tzaros were before. This is why we came to the world. We came to the world. Why we come to the world? We came to the world because, and this is going to fit in exactly to the story that we're going to speak about next week. But let's not forget this Nakuda. We came to the world to go through the ups and downs. That's why Hashem sent us here. And the Ramchal explains, the Ramchal asks a question, he says, why did Rabban Hashem do this? So he says, so we should have schar. What's the schar? That we should, when we go to Olam Haba, we won't be embarrassed that we're getting something for free. We'll say we worked for it. So the famous question is that even atheists, they ask, if you believe this, why didn't God just create it? You wouldn't have embarrassment. So Ramchal says, but you idiots. Because Ramchal says that obviously there's a chokhmah, a wisdom to Hashem that nobody understands, that this is what Hashem knew, that it would be much greater, our pleasures in the next world, if we went through this. So Hashem sent us for this. To feed this, I want to answer all these questions. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu not go out? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was a bechina of tzaddik amiti. If Moshe Rabbeinu went out, he would have destroyed Amalek completely forever. Because the tzaddik amiti can do that. Yeshua wasn't on the level of tzaddik amiti. He was the student of a tzaddik amiti. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go out because he didn't want, he would have destroyed Amalek. So the question was, but why not destroy Amalek? Because the answer is, what's Amalek? Amalek is not a physical war. Amalek is a spiritual. Amalek is all the tests. We just said the whole reason we're living here is for the tests. This is one of the answers. So the whole reason why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go was because then Moshe Rabbeinu would have destroyed everything in the point of the world. It wouldn't be here anymore. Because the whole point of the world is that when a Jew goes through the hardships that each one of us go through daily and we stay strong. That is the answer. The next question was, so why didn't they put their hands up the whole time? Because they wanted to show to all the Yidden, you think that the hands are always going to be up and everything's going to be easygoing. No, there's going to be times that your hands are going to be up in tefillah and you're going to be going good and there's going to be milas and you're going to be baki barotzi. Baki barotzi, everything, you think you're in the heavens and you're everything. All of a sudden, plop. Plop, you know nothing. Your Rebbe screams at you. He tells you, by the way, yesterday, he tells you, you have some rabbi, Rocha Mukabel, who starts scaring him. Are you this thing, you did this Avera? And the guy goes into hysteria and it must be the Marasha. What happened yesterday? You were in the... you God's like, you know what I'm saying? Like you were doing all because the world's because of you, nobody else. Now today you feel like a low life. What's going on? The answer is that is what his job is, to feel both. Because if he only felt one or the other, if he felt just this way, terrible always, so then the Rabban Hashem, there's midas harachamim in the world, which we'll talk about next week. This whole thing about how Hashem created the world, which fits into the first few words of the story, actual story. But the answer is so that's why they put their hands up and then down to be merames. To give us a suggestion that your hands will be up and then they go down, but you'll be able to also win the war. Because why? Like the Rebbe always says, when you fall, Baki B'Shoiv, which is the next thing, scream Aye, Hashem, your hands go right back up. The question was, why is it Lefi Chorav? What do we care? The Rebbe says in L'Kutim Ran Chelik Aleph, Torah Beis, what's a Cherev? Cherev Pipios, as two-headed sword. What is that? We know that Tefillah is two-headed sword. Why? Because in Tefillah there's two ideas in Tefillah, the Rebbe says. And it's brought in all the Chassidish Svarim and all the Kabbalah, and it's based on a Gemara. It's based on Gemara and Brachas. The Gemara says when a person davens, you shouldn't ask for his needs, you first praise Hashem. So there's praising God, and then there's asking for your needs, which are the two heads of the sword, which is Tefillah. How did they win the war? Not Lefi Charev, the physical sword. Charev is what? Is the Tefillah. They won it through the Tefillah. So why is it, I understand what was the fifth question I had? Why is it according to the sword? Just say, for the sword they won. Lefi Charev, the amount of tefillah they put in, that's how they won the war. A Yid, if you see you're not answered, what does Rav Nachman say? That means you didn't daven enough. Daven again. And then I said, what's Lefi? Lefi is the lashon of P, mouth. Lefi Charev, the mouth of Charev, which is tefillah. This I wanted to answer the 5 questions. And that's Baki Brati, Baki B'Shoiv. I wanted to say that, So that's really be'etzim. That's what the Rebbe is saying over here. Baderech. Baderech is when you come to Amalek and you have your own life story. And you have Amalek. How do you beat Amalek? Through Torah Vov. Baki brotzi, baki b'shoiv. That's the way to beat it. What's interesting is, I want to just say a nice, something I had when the first year I gave, you were there, Obi. You remember the first one about Purim and all that. Hashem Mamash sent me just a rayon, as you would say. What's interesting is, what happened in the Megillah? The story goes that Mordechai Tzaddik, who was Bechin of Tzaddik Amiti, Rav Nachman talks about, Rav Nachman talks about it in Likutei Halachos always. Rav Nachman writes over there something amazing. Rav Nachman writes, why every year do we read the Megillah? He says the same thing. Because the Megillah is about a story. So we have to read a story because the story of the Megillah will wake up just like Rav Nachman's stories wakes us up. The Megillah's Esther is also a story that'll wake up her own story. Which is how the Yidden, what happened over there? That they had to keep their emunah. They had to keep their emunah in the Purim. And boom, what happened? They won in the end. They won. How'd they win? Why'd they win? Because they kept on to their emunah. What's interesting is, all of a sudden Hashem sent me a major nekuda, I think. How did that Tnei start? It started, the first glimmer of hope that you see that happened was with the story of Bigsan and Seresh. They were the two servants of Achashverosh. They spoke in Tarshish, which was a language that they didn't speak in Shushan. In Shushan they spoke, I guess, Farsi, because it was Paras. And Bigsan and Seresh planned to kill the king through a snake, putting snake poison in the water. And Mordechai was standing and overheard. Why did Mordechai understand? Because he was from the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin spoke how many languages? 70 languages. What does Rav Nachman say? That there's 70 faces of Torah, and a person can fall asleep 70 ways. And through my Sipurim Maises, I wake him up from all 70 sleepings, as you would say. What's the sleeping we said? Amalek, Suffolk. Who was the biggest Amalek in the history of Israel? Haman. Haman and Rasha. Haman was Amalek. What did Haman want to do? Destroy Am Yisrael. How did Mordechai win the whole Haman's war? By hearing Bigsan and Seresh. And then Achashverosh took him, and that's how the whole day started. What did he know? 70 languages. Why Dafka 70? Because Mordechai was Bechina the Tzaddik Amiti, that he had the Shiurim Panim of the Torah. Each Shiurim Panim is different Loshen in the Torah, I wanted to say. So only Mordechai was able to do this nes, not the rest of the Klal Yisrael, because they weren't asleep, but he was the Tzaddik Amiti. He was the Moshe Rabbeinu that didn't fall asleep of his generation. See, he had the 70 panim of Torah. What happened? Through him, he was able to pull everybody else out. How? Through the 70 panim, which is the Torah, and to pull them out of. And what happened after that? From there, the Mamash was able to be makabel the Torah with Ahava. The point is, what are we getting at all that? That the Rebbe says baderech. The Rebbe is saying this purposely because this is all my point of the stories I'm going to tell you, is how to deal with life and life's travels. Life is a travel. It's a physical and a spiritual travel. And next week I'm going to get into Bezat Hashem, or the next year. Baderech is there's a huge kabbalah aspect in it, based on a lot of Zohar and all that, about why a lot of tzaddikim have to go physical travels like the Baal Shem Tov and all that. But for this nekuda we have it. Baderech is baki b'rotzi baki b'shoiv. When you go through life's travels, the Sipurim Maises is what keeps you alive, because it teaches you about baki b'rotzi baki b'shoiv. And this first story is in each word. Like I said, I don't know how much of the story we're going to get through, but that's what I want to show you, that each word in the Rebbe, one word baderech, is all this and endless more. Obviously we didn't touch on anything, but a little bit we could touch on. And Bezat Hashem, through the shir, we should, the shir we just gave, all of us, Baruch Hashem, the Torah we just learned together, we should be zeicha Bezat Hashem to be, to start today already, to wherever we are, to always scream to Rabbeinu Shalom, because really that's what the Geula depends on. And when I say Geula, I don't mean the Geula of Mashiach, that also Bezat Hashem for sure. I mean our own Geula. Like Rav Nachman says, the biggest Geula is the redemption of our souls. And Rav Nachman said, I already was zeicha to my Geula, because he listened to what the Rebbe Rav Nachman said. And what did he listen to? He listened to Supreme Maisias and Kutim Ran and everything. So we should be zeicha to the same thing. Bezat Hashem Mer V'Yamenu. Amen. Shkoyach.